Jordan's breath catches in the sterile, cold air of the hospital room, the fluorescent lights buzzing faintly above. His fingers, trembling slightly, hover over his phone, where the banking app glows in the dim light. He stares at the screen as the notification blinks. $2,500 sent to a family member. A regular transfer, one he's made without hesitation for months, maybe even years. The same family member who's never once said thank you, never acknowledged the sacrifice, but tonight feels different. The silence of the room, the lingering scent of antiseptic, only amplifies the thoughts racing through his mind. Is this it? Is this the last time he'll make this payment? The question pulses in his head, louder than any beeping monitor. Jordan shifts uncomfortably in the bed, torn between duty and resentment. What if he's done now? What if, for once, he finally says no? The stakes have never felt higher. The steady beep of the hospital monitor fades as Jordan's mind drifts back to a time before the sterile room, before the overwhelming weight of the hospital bed and IVs. It was a few years ago, when everything still felt normal, or at least manageable. Back then, Jordan had just started their first real job, excited about the future and eager to pay off student loans. They'd been living paycheck to paycheck, sure, but it was a routine they knew how to navigate. That's when the calls began. First, it was a cousin, then an aunt, and soon, almost every family member seemed to be asking for help. I'm behind on rent. The car broke down. I'm going through a tough time. Jordan's heart, always soft when it came to family, couldn't say no. They knew what it felt like to struggle. Hadn't they all? But as the months turned into years, those calls didn't stop. They didn't even lessen. At first, Jordan justified it. I can help them now. I'll manage. But as the bills piled up and the balance in their own bank account dwindled, the sacrifices became harder to ignore. Jordan's parents, siblings, and extended family never once offered to help in return, and slowly the feeling of being used sank in. Each transfer felt like a silent contract they'd never agreed to, an obligation masked as love. The weight of it all began to suffocate. How many more times? How much longer could they give when they were barely scraping by themselves? The emotional burden was unbearable, pulling at Jordan's chest with each new request. The line between family and financial responsibility had long since blurred. It was late one evening when the call came in. Jordan was sitting in the quiet of their small apartment, the glow of the TV flickering as background noise. They had just finished a long shift at work and were mentally drained, the weight of the hospital stay still looming over them. The name on the caller ID made their heart sink. Aunt Carla. Jordan, I need $2,500. Carla's voice crackled on the other end, urgent and almost frantic. There's an emergency. I'm in a bind, and I just don't know where else to turn. Jordan's stomach tightened. Another emergency? It seemed like the same story every few months. Something always came up, always requiring more money than the last time. How could they ask for so much? The sum felt overwhelming. $2,500, it was more than Jordan had in their savings, more than they could afford to give without jeopardizing their own security. But what choice did they have? This was family. Jordan's mind swirled. Should they keep giving? Should they continue the cycle? The words of the past echoed in their ears. Your family, Jordan. You'll understand. The understanding, though, was beginning to wear thin. They were constantly drained, both emotionally and financially, by requests like these. Every time they helped, it felt like they lost a piece of themselves. They didn't have the energy to keep this up, not when it was becoming clear that their family didn't see the toll it was taking. The inner conflict raged within them. Do I say no? Can I? Saying no would mean rejecting family, and that was a thought Jordan couldn't easily bear. Yet, how many more times could they offer their last dollar, knowing it would be taken without a second thought, without a thank you, without any recognition? As the seconds ticked by, the emotional weight became suffocating. The decision was more than just about money, it was about their self-worth, their dignity. Jordan's hands clenched around the phone, every muscle in their body tense with the growing realization that they could no longer live like this. The moment of truth had arrived, and it was time to decide whether to keep giving or to finally take a stand for themselves. Jordan's mind drifts deeper into the past, and memories of disappointment flood in, like an old film playing on a loop. The first time it truly stung was when Jordan was just a kid, about 12. They had worked for weeks, saving up their allowance to buy their mom a special birthday gift. A hand-painted mug they'd made in art class, something they were proud of. It wasn't expensive, but it was meaningful. The morning of her birthday, Jordan was so excited to see her reaction, but when she opened it, she barely looked up from the pile of bills on the kitchen table. "Thanks," she mumbled absent-mindedly, tossing it aside to deal with something more pressing. She didn't even notice. Jordan tried to push the feeling away, but it festered. As the years passed, things didn't improve. Every achievement, every milestone was met with indifference. High school graduation, no one showed up to the ceremony. College acceptance letter, no calls, no congratulations. It wasn't just the big moments either. The small ones, the ones that mattered most to Jordan, were ignored. A first job, an award for excellence, a milestone in personal growth. They all passed by unnoticed, swallowed up in the endless sea of family crises, demands, and expectations. And now, as an adult, the pattern was more obvious than ever. The calls for money, the constant emotional strain. It felt like an unspoken rule of their family. You give, you sacrifice, you love, but you never get anything back. Every phone call asking for money, every unacknowledged favor, made Jordan feel like a well that had been drained dry, but no one cared to refill. Despite it all, Jordan still loved them. Their family. It was the core of everything, the part that kept them coming back, that held onto hope for change. Jordan wanted things to be different. They wanted to believe that one day they'd experience the love and support they had so long given away. But the truth loomed large. Love without respect wasn't love, it was duty. It was a contract, a cycle of giving that only led to emptiness. As the seconds ticked by, Jordan felt the weight of it all. The truth became undeniable. Nothing will change unless I make a dramatic decision now. The suspense tightened around their chest as the realization crystallized in their mind. To continue this pattern meant they would remain trapped, but to walk away, to finally stand up for themselves, would be the hardest choice of their life. Would they choose self-respect, or would they keep hoping for a change that would never come? The phone rang again, its shrill sound cutting through the tense silence of the room. Jordan glanced at the caller ID, seeing Aunt Carla's name flash across the screen. Not again. The familiar knot tightened in their chest, but this time there was no hesitation. No more excuses. Jordan took a deep breath and answered. "Jordan, I need you to help me out." Carla's voice came through thick with urgency. It's an emergency. I don't know what else to do. I'm in real trouble. Please, I need $2,500 right now." The words felt like they were suffocating Jordan, the weight of them pressing down harder than ever before. This time, it wasn't just about money, it was about everything. The endless cycle of being used, of giving without ever being seen, of constantly sacrificing while receiving nothing in return. The anger that had been building for years boiled up within them, but something else started to emerge. Clarity. No more. The thought pierced through the cloud of anxiety and doubt. Jordan's heart raced, their hands trembling as they stood at the precipice of a decision they had been avoiding for so long. "This will be the last payment. I can't do this anymore." In that moment, something clicked. This wasn't just about finances, it was about reclaiming their autonomy, their power, their right to say no. It wasn't about being cruel or rejecting family. It was about respecting themselves. The realization was sharp, final, and terrifying. The pain of letting go would be immense, but the alternative, continuing to give, continuing to drain themselves, was even worse. The anticipation gripped Jordan's chest. They could already feel the fallout, the guilt, the anger, the disappointment from family members who would never understand. The tension was palpable, hanging in the air like a storm. But it didn't matter. Jordan had made up their mind. The decision was made. Now, the only question was, could they live with the consequences? With a deep breath, Jordan's fingers hovered over the screen of their phone, the familiar glow of the banking app staring back at them. Their hands shook, not from uncertainty about the decision, it was already made, but from the sheer weight of what this moment represented. They had always been the one to give, the one to step in when family needed help, regardless of their own situation. But now, they were taking a stand. No more. With a tremor in their fingers, they tapped the screen and cancelled the automatic $2,500 transfer. It felt like severing a lifeline, a connection that had defined their relationship with their family for years. The app confirmed the cancellation, but there was no sense of relief, only a growing anxiety that gnawed at Jordan's insides. Next came the hardest part, telling Carla. Jordan could feel the tension building in their chest as they opened a new message. Their thumb hovered over the keyboard, hesitating, trying to find the right words. It wasn't just about money, it was about everything. How do you tell someone you can no longer be there for them? They typed carefully, each word a careful step into unfamiliar territory. Carla, I've helped you out before, but I can't do it anymore. I'm not in a place where I can keep giving, especially when I'm barely getting by myself. I've been stretched too thin for too long. I need to focus on myself, and I can't keep carrying this burden. I hope you understand that this is the last time I can help. Jordan's finger hovered over the send button, doubt creeping in. What would Carla say? Would she understand? Or would the anger pour out, the rejection be too much? The possibilities swirled in their mind, each one worse than the last. Will she hate me? Will she never speak to me again? The weight of those unknowns was almost suffocating. With a final deep breath, Jordan pressed send. And then they waited. Each second stretched out, the silence of the room pressing in. They could almost hear the echo of the message in the empty space between them. The suspense was unbearable. They sat there, palms sweating, heart racing. What would the response be? Would it be angry, accusatory, or would there be something worse, nothing at all? The quiet was deafening. The moment felt like a tightrope walk, teetering between the freedom they desperately needed and the regret they feared would follow. Jordan stared at the screen, heart pounding in their chest. The seconds felt like hours as they waited for Carla's response. They had braced themselves for anger, for hurtful words, for a backlash that would leave them feeling guilty for their decision. But when the notification finally appeared, the words that came through were nothing like what they had expected. Jordan, I'm so sorry. I didn't realize how much I've been asking of you. I've always taken you for granted, and I see now how selfish I've been. I was so focused on my own problems that I didn't stop to think about the toll it was taking on you. I understand now, and I'm truly sorry for making you feel like this was your responsibility. I'll never ask for money again. You deserve better. The words hit Jordan like a sudden wave. They read them over and over, disbelief clouding their thoughts. Guilt? Remorse? Carla, the person who had always asked without hesitation, was apologizing. It was a revelation that Jordan had never imagined. A moment they had convinced themselves would never come. The walls they had been building for so long, the armor they'd worn to protect themselves from the hurt, suddenly felt unnecessary. This wasn't the response they had feared. It was a genuine acknowledgement of their pain. For the first time, Jordan felt seen. They had expected rejection, but instead they had received an apology, a moment of clarity from someone who had never fully understood the weight of their actions. But as the shock began to settle, a new wave of uncertainty crept in. Was this apology real, or was it just another fleeting promise, another empty gesture designed to smooth over the discomfort? Could Carla's words lead to actual change, or was this just another moment in the cycle of unfulfilled promises? The suspense now shifted. Was this the turning point Jordan had been waiting for? Or would the apology be just another fleeting moment that faded into nothingness? The question hung in the air, unanswered. As Jordan sat back, the phone still in their hand, a wave of quiet strength washed over them. The relief from cancelling the transfer, the immediate relief of taking control of their finances, felt like a weight lifting from their shoulders. But it was more than that. This moment was about something deeper. It wasn't just about money, it was about reclaiming control over their life. The real change was in the confidence they now had in themselves. For the first time in a long while, Jordan felt empowered. They had made a decision that was hard, painful even, but it was their decision. No longer would they allow themselves to be trapped by the expectations of others. No longer would they let their self-worth be tied to what they could give. They thought about the years of emotional toll, how much they had given and how little they had received in return. It would take time for that wound to heal, but they were finally ready to face it. They had set a boundary, and while it felt like a small step, it was monumental. Jordan realized they didn't need to continue sacrificing themselves for the sake of others. They could love their family without losing themselves in the process. The road ahead wasn't clear. There were still doubts, still moments of uncertainty about what would happen next. The future wasn't guaranteed, and old habits would be hard to break. But in this moment, Jordan was filled with a quiet hope. They had made it through the hardest part, choosing themselves. As the suspense of the unknown lingered, Jordan understood that they were worthy of respect, not just love. It would take time to rebuild their emotional strength, but for the first time in years, they were looking forward to a future where they could be both strong and free. Jordan sat alone in the quiet of their living room. The soft hum of the city outside the window, the only sound breaking the silence. The glow of the evening light filtered through the blinds, casting long shadows across the room. For the first time in ages, they felt a sense of calm settle in their chest. There was no buzzing phone, no anxious anticipation for the next call or message. The familiar weight of family demands, of constant financial requests, had lifted. The decision to stop giving, to stop sacrificing so much for others, felt like a slow exhale after holding their breath for years. The future was still uncertain, and the emotional toll would take time to heal, but Jordan had taken control. They had set a boundary, a line they no longer planned to cross, and for the first time in a long time, that felt like enough. As the minutes ticked by, the peace settled deeper into their bones. Jordan could still feel the weight of the decision they had made, but it no longer felt like a burden. It felt like freedom. The suspense of the unknown, what would happen next, how family would react, still lingered in the back of their mind, but for now, that uncertainty was no longer something to fear. Just as Jordan closed their eyes, taking a moment to savor the quiet, the phone rang. The name on the screen made their stomach tighten. Carla. They hesitated, fingers trembling slightly as they answered. Jordan, can we meet? I need to talk. The question hung in the air, unanswered. Would this conversation bring reconciliation, or would it drag them back into the past they had fought so hard to escape? The suspense lingered, leaving the future uncertain. But Jordan, for once, was ready to face it on their own terms.